Welcome to my channel, Spookies Stories. Have you ever felt a presence when no one is around? In West Midlands, some places are so haunted that even locals refuse to enter. I walked through dark corridors, abandoned halls, and eerie castles, feeling fear mixed with curiosity. Tonight, join me as we uncover 10 chilling locations where shadows move, whispers echo, and the past refuses to stay silent. If you're enjoying this spine-chilling journey, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more haunted adventures. 1. Aston Hall, Birmingham. I had always been fascinated by old haunted places, so when I finally got the chance to visit Aston Hall in Birmingham, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The sun was setting as I arrived, casting long shadows across the grand Jacobean mansion. Its red brick walls, tall chimneys, and massive windows looked beautiful, yet strangely intimidating. As I stepped closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me. Walking through the front entrance, I noticed the wooden floors creaking under every step. The air felt colder than outside, almost as if the house itself was breathing around me. I paused in the main hall, staring at the grand staircase, and wondered about the stories these walls had witnessed. Locals had told me about the White Lady, a spirit who had been seen gliding through the halls late at night. At first I laughed it off, thinking it was just a tale, but as I moved deeper into the house, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I decided to explore the old servants' quarters on the ground floor. The rooms were dark and narrow, with faded wallpaper and dusty furniture. Suddenly, I heard a soft whisper coming from behind one of the doors. I froze. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure anyone outside could hear it. I told myself it must be the wind, but my instinct screamed otherwise. Slowly, I opened the door. The room appeared empty, yet I felt a cold presence brush past me. Trying to calm myself, I continued upstairs. The corridor seemed endless, and shadows danced across the walls as I walked past. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a flicker of white moving near the staircase. My stomach dropped. I blinked, and it vanished, leaving only silence. I could feel my own breath, shaky and loud, echoing in the hallway. Even though I was terrified, part of me wanted to stay, to see more, to feel the history of Aston Hall in every creaking floorboard and chilling draft. By the time I left, night had fallen completely. I kept looking back at the mansion, its windows glowing faintly in the darkness, as if silently watching me go. Driving away, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen and felt. Aston Hall wasn't just a beautiful historic building, it was alive with stories, whispers, and spirits that made every step inside unforgettable. That night, I realized that some places carry memories so strong that even time cannot erase them.
2. Dudley Castle, Dudley. I had heard countless stories about Dudley Castle long before I ever visited it, but nothing could have prepared me for the feeling of actually standing there. The castle sits atop a hill, its ruins silhouetted against the gray sky, looking both majestic and eerie. As I walked up the winding path, I could feel the history seeping from the stone walls. Every step seemed to echo with the voices of the past. I entered through the main archway, and immediately a chill ran down my spine. The air was heavy, and the wind whistled through the broken windows in a way that sounded almost like whispers. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself it was just the cold, but deep down, I knew Dudley Castle had an atmosphere that was hard to ignore. Locals had warned me about strange sightings, shadows that moved on their own, and the ghost of a headless soldier said to roam the corridors. Curious and slightly terrified, I explored the Great Hall first. The walls were crumbling, and patches of moss had claimed the stone. I imagined the lives that had once filled this place, the laughter, the arguments, and the fear during battles long ago. As I walked further, I heard footsteps behind me, though no one was there. My heart raced, and I turned quickly, seeing nothing but empty air and fluttering shadows. I climbed the old staircase carefully, the wooden steps groaning under my weight. At the top, I peered into one of the narrow rooms. The atmosphere was thick, almost suffocating. I swear I felt a cold hand brush past my arm. My mind raced. Was it the wind or something else entirely? I couldn't be sure, but the hair on my arm stood up, and my chest tightened with both fear and awe. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, dark shadows across the castle ruins, I realized that I had been inside for hours. Each corner of Dudley Castle seemed to hold a story, and even as I walked away, the feeling of being watched lingered. Driving back down the hill, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a figure silhouetted in the ruins. That night, I understood that Dudley Castle wasn't just stone in history. It was alive with memories, whispers, and echoes of those who had walked its halls long before me. 3. The Old Crown, Digbeth, Birmingham. I had always loved visiting old pubs, especially those with a reputation for being haunted. So when I found myself outside the Old Crown in Digbeth, Birmingham, I felt a mix of excitement and unease. The building looked like it had been frozen in time, with its timber-framed walls and centuries-old facade. As I stepped closer, the evening air seemed heavier, almost as if the pub itself was waiting for me. Entering through the heavy wooden doors, I was immediately hit with the smell of aged wood and beer, mingled with something older, something that made the hairs on my arms stand up. The interior was dimly lit, with long shadows stretching across the worn floorboards. I had heard locals speak of a female spirit who wandered the upper rooms, and I couldn't help but wonder if I would see her tonight. I decided to explore the ground floor first. Every creak of the wooden floor echoed like a warning. I walked past the bar, noticing the old photographs and memorabilia lining the walls. Suddenly, I felt a cold breeze brush past me, even though the doors were closed. My heart skipped a beat, and I glanced around, but no one was there. I told myself it was just my imagination, but deep down I knew the Old Crown had its secrets. Curiosity got the better of me, and I climbed the narrow staircase to the upper rooms. The air grew colder with every step, and I could hear faint whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. At the top, I entered a small room with a low ceiling. I could feel a presence watching me silently. The shadows in the corners seemed to move, and I had to remind myself to breathe. For a moment, I thought I saw a woman in old-fashioned clothing standing by the window. But when I blinked, she was gone. I stayed there for a while, absorbing the eerie atmosphere, feeling the centuries of history pressing down around me. Every sound, every draft seemed alive, almost as if the walls themselves were telling stories. When I finally left, the streets of Digbeth felt strangely quiet, as if the pub had imprinted its presence on me. Driving back down the hill, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a figure silhouetted in the ruins. That night, I understood the Old Crown wasn't just a place to grab a drink. It was a living memory, a space where the past and the present intertwined, and where whispers of history lingered long after the lights were out.
4. St. Mary's Guildhall, Coventry. I had always been drawn to historic buildings, especially those with a reputation for being haunted, so when I finally visited St. Mary's Guildhall in Coventry, I felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. The building stood proudly in the heart of the city, its stone walls weathered by centuries, its windows tall and imposing. As I approached, I could feel a weight in the air, almost as if the past were pressing gently against me. Entering through the large wooden doors, I was greeted by the musty smell of old timber and dust. The main hall was vast, with high ceilings and carved wooden beams that seemed to hold stories of every event that had taken place over the centuries. Locals had told me about the shadowy figures that appeared in the hall late at night, and I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine as I walked through. I wandered slowly, my footsteps echoing against the stone floors. Each corner I turned seemed to whisper fragments of history, echoes of laughter, whispers of secret meetings, and the faint sense of people who had lived and died within these walls. Suddenly, I thought I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, a dark figure slipping past one of the tall windows. I stopped, my heart racing, and looked carefully, but the hall was empty. Curiosity and a strange sense of bravery pushed me further. I climbed the narrow staircase to the upper rooms. The air grew colder and heavier, and I could hear faint creaks as if someone or something was walking alongside me. In one small room, the shadows seemed to shift and twist. For a moment, I felt as though someone was silently observing me, just out of view. My chest tightened, and I had to remind myself to breathe. The stories of ghosts here didn't feel like tales anymore. They felt real. I spent hours inside, absorbing the eerie atmosphere, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down around me. By the time I left, the evening had grown dark, and the streets outside felt quiet, almost reverent. Walking away, I realized that St. Mary's Guildhall wasn't just a building, it was a vessel of memories, a place where the past and present coexisted, and where whispers of history lingered long after people had gone. 5. Coventry Cathedral Ruins, Coventry. I had always been fascinated by sites that carried both history and tragedy, so when I stood outside the ruins of Coventry Cathedral, I felt a mix of awe and unease. The skeletal remains of the building rose against the sky, broken walls and shattered windows telling stories of destruction from the Second World War. As I walked closer, I could almost hear the echoes of the past, the sounds of a city and its people caught in the chaos of bombing. Stepping through the ruined archways, the air felt heavy and thick, as if the building itself remembered the lives that had once moved within its walls. I had read about ghostly sightings here, spirits that lingered among the stones, perhaps unable to leave the memories of that tragic night. Every stone, every crack seemed to hum with a silent energy, and I felt my heart tighten with a mix of fear and respect. I wandered carefully across the floor, my footsteps loud against the broken tiles. Shadows of the ruined walls stretched long in the fading sunlight, creating shapes that seemed alive. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure in the distance, moving among the ruins. My chest raced, and I stopped, holding my breath. But when I blinked, there was nothing, only the wind whispering through the hollow spaces. Drawn forward by curiosity, I explored the side chapels and collapsed sections. The air grew colder, and I could almost feel the presence of those who had once prayed here. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional creak of a beam or the flutter of birds overhead. For a moment, I imagined the cathedral as it once stood, filled with light and life, and then contrasted it with the haunting emptiness that surrounded me now. By the time I left, night was falling, and the city lights reflected off the broken stones. I kept looking back at the ruins, a silent monument to the lives lost and the resilience of the people who rebuilt around it. Coventry Cathedral wasn't just a ruin, it was a living memory, a place where history, tragedy, and lingering spirits intertwined. Walking away, I realized that some places carry the weight of the past so strongly that even time cannot erase it, and Coventry Cathedral was one of those places.
6. Warstone Lane Cemetery, Jewelry Quarter, Birmingham. I had always been drawn to old cemeteries, the kind that carry stories of people long gone. So when I stepped into Warstone Lane Cemetery in Birmingham, I felt a strange mixture of curiosity and unease. The sun was dipping behind the old buildings of the Jewelry Quarter, casting long shadows over the weathered gravestones. The air was cool and heavy, and I felt a shiver run down my spine as I walked along the narrow paths between the stones. The cemetery was quiet, almost unnaturally so. Each headstone seemed to hold secrets of lives that had been forgotten by the modern world. I had read about ghostly sightings here, figures that appeared and disappeared, and whispers of footsteps when no one was around. As I wandered deeper, the atmosphere became denser, the air seeming to press down on me with a weight I could not explain. I stopped near an old family plot, the stones cracked and leaning with age. As I looked around, I thought I saw a shadow move across the path behind me. My heart skipped a beat and I spun around, but there was nothing. Only the rustling of leaves in the trees and the faint call of a bird somewhere in the distance. I told myself it was my imagination, yet the feeling of being watched lingered. Curiosity drove me further along the winding paths. I passed crypts and mausoleums, each one telling silent stories of the people buried inside. The air grew colder as evening approached, and I could hear faint creaks and whispers carried by the wind. For a moment, I felt a hand brush against my shoulder, but when I looked, no one was there. My chest tightened, and I had to remind myself to breathe. Warstone Lane Cemetery wasn't just a resting place for the dead. It felt alive with memories, with the echoes of lives that had once walked these paths. By the time I left, darkness had settled over the cemetery, and the shadows of the stones stretched long and eerie. Walking back toward the streets of Birmingham, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see a figure standing among the gravestones. That night, I realized Warstone Lane Cemetery was more than a burial ground. It was a silent witness to history, a place where the past lingered in every whisper of the wind and every shadow cast by the fading light. 7. The Courthouse, Birmingham. I had always been fascinated by old buildings with dark histories, so when I arrived at the courthouse in Birmingham, I felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The grand stone building loomed over the street, its tall windows and ornate facade carrying the weight of centuries of trials and judgments. As I approached, I could feel the heavy atmosphere surrounding it, almost as if the walls themselves had absorbed the fear and tension of everyone who had walked inside. Entering through the large doors, I immediately noticed how quiet it was. The air felt colder than outside, and I could hear my footsteps echoing along the high ceilings and empty corridors. Locals had told me stories of strange sounds, footsteps that followed no one, whispers in empty rooms, and shadows moving along the walls. At first, I thought it was just imagination, but the feeling of being watched settled over me like a weight. I wandered through the main hall, observing the worn wooden benches and the faded plaques that lined the walls. Each corner seemed to carry memories of trials, arguments, and moments of intense emotion. Suddenly, I thought I heard a faint rustling behind me. I froze, my heart racing, and turned quickly, but the corridor was empty. Only the sound of my own breathing filled the space. Curiosity pushed me further. I climbed the narrow staircase to the upper chambers, the wooden steps groaning under my weight. The air grew colder with each step, and I could feel a presence lingering nearby. In one of the rooms, the shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, and I had the overwhelming sense that someone or something was silently observing me. My chest tightened, and I had to remind myself to breathe. Every creak, every whisper of wind through the old windows amplified the tension, making it impossible to ignore the history that lingered here. By the time I left, dusk had settled over the street, and the road outside felt unusually quiet. Walking away, I glanced back at the courthouse, its windows dark and silent, yet somehow alive with memories. That night, I realized that the building wasn't just a place where justice had been served. It was a witness to centuries of human emotion, a space where the echoes of the past lingered long after the gavel had fallen, and where the stories of those who had walked its halls remained etched into the very walls.
8. Swanswell Gate,
Coventry. I had always been intrigued by places where history and mystery seemed to collide. So when I found myself outside Swanswell Gate in Coventry, a mix of excitement and unease filled me. The old gate, standing alone among modern streets, looked like a portal to another time. Its stone arches were worn, and moss clung to the edges, giving it a quiet, eerie presence. As I approached, the air felt heavier, almost as if the gate itself was alive with memories of the past. Stepping closer, I noticed how silent the area was. Even though the city hummed nearby, this spot felt separate, suspended in time. Locals had told me stories about the ghostly sightings here, apparitions that appeared near the gate at night, and strange sounds that echoed when no one was around. I tried to keep my mind rational, but a shiver ran down my spine as I walked under the arch. I wandered around, running my fingers along the cold stone. Every crevice seemed to hold whispers from centuries past. As I looked up, I thought I saw a shadow flicker across the top of the gate. My heart raced and I froze, listening intently. The wind blew through the arch, carrying a soft, almost whispering sound that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I told myself it was just the wind, yet the sensation of being watched lingered. Curiosity drew me closer to the old pathway beyond the gate. The stones were uneven, and the area was dimly lit by the fading evening light. For a moment, I could almost imagine the people who had passed through here hundreds of years ago, their footsteps echoing beside mine. A faint chill brushed my shoulder, and I spun around quickly. Nothing was there. My chest tightened, and I had to remind myself to breathe. The air felt heavy with stories, both remembered and forgotten. As night approached, I finally stepped away from Swanswell Gate. The city lights contrasted sharply with the quiet presence of the gate, yet I couldn't stop glancing back. Walking away, I realized that this was more than a relic of the past. It was a witness to centuries of life, mystery, and lingering spirits. Swanswell Gate wasn't just stone and mortar. It was a place where the past quietly watched, and where the whispers of history could still be felt if you dared to pay attention. 9. Hayden Hill House, Cradley Heath. I had always been fascinated by old manor houses, especially those with a reputation for being haunted, so when I arrived at Hayden Hill House in Cradley Heath, I felt a mix of excitement and unease. The house, surrounded by overgrown gardens and towering trees, looked both beautiful and slightly menacing. Its brick walls were weathered with age, and the windows reflected the fading light, giving the impression that someone, or something, was watching me. As I walked up the path and reached the main entrance, I noticed how silent the place was. The air felt colder here than the surrounding streets, and a shiver ran down my spine. I had read stories about ghostly sightings in the house, shadows moving across rooms, strange noises at night, and even the occasional unexplained footsteps. Despite trying to rationalize it, I couldn't shake the feeling that Hayden Hill House was alive with memories of the past. Inside, the wooden floors creaked under every step. I wandered through the main hall, my eyes drawn to the old furniture covered in dust and the portraits that seemed to follow me with their gaze. As I moved deeper into the house, I heard a soft whisper behind me. I froze, my heart pounding, and turned quickly. Nothing. The feeling of being watched persisted, and I couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of fear and awe. Curiosity pushed me further upstairs. The narrow staircase groaned on my weight, and the air grew colder with every step. In one of the upper rooms, I felt a sudden chill, as if someone had just brushed past me. The shadows in the corners seemed to move subtly, and for a moment I thought I saw a figure standing by the window, looking out silently. My chest tightened, and I had to remind myself to breathe. The air felt heavy with stories, both remembered and forgotten. As dusk settled, I finally stepped away from Hayden Hill House. The city lights contrasted sharply with the quiet presence of the house, yet I couldn't stop glancing back. Walking away, I realized that this was more than a relic of the past. It was a witness to centuries of life, mystery, and lingering spirits. Hayden Hill House wasn't just stone and mortar. It was a place where the past lingered, and where the whispers of long-forgotten lives echoed through the walls, and where history and mystery intertwined in every shadow and creaking floorboard.
10. The Black Country Arms, Dudley. I had always been drawn to old pubs, especially those with a reputation for being haunted, so when I stepped inside the Black Country Arms in Dudley, I felt a mix of curiosity and unease. The building looked like it had been frozen in time, with its dark wooden beams and worn brick walls, giving it a sense of history that was almost tangible. As I walked through the entrance, the air felt heavier, carrying the smell of aged wood, beer, and something older, something I couldn't quite identify. The interior was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the floor as the fading daylight slipped through the windows. I had heard stories from locals about strange occurrences here, the sound of footsteps when no one was around, objects moving on their own, and the occasional cold spot that sent shivers down the spine. At first, I tried to dismiss these tales as imagination, but the atmosphere inside made it hard to ignore the possibility that there was more than just history lingering here. I wandered past the bar, noticing old photographs and memorabilia that lined the walls. Every creak of the wooden floorboards echoed louder than expected, and I could swear I felt a faint presence brushing past me. My heart raced, and for a moment I froze, scanning the room, but it was empty. The pub seemed to hold its secrets tightly, revealing them only in fleeting glimpses and sudden chills. Curiosity drove me further into the back rooms, narrow corridors where the light barely reached. The air grew colder, and I could hear subtle creaks and whispers as if the building itself were breathing. In one small corner, the shadows seemed to shift in a way that didn't match the light. For a brief instant, I thought I saw a figure standing silently watching me. My chest tightened, and I had to remind myself to breathe. Every moment made me feel more connected to the history and the unseen lives that had walked these halls. By the time I left, darkness had fallen over Dudley, and the streets outside felt quiet, almost reverent. Walking away, I kept glancing back at the Black Country Arms, its windows dark, yet somehow alive with memories. That night, I realized it wasn't just a pub. It was a living testament to history, a place where the past lingered and where the whispers of countless lives could still be felt in every shadow, every creak, and every corner of the building. Ever felt that chill run down your spine when you know you're not alone? Walking through the streets of West Midlands, I kept thinking about the stories I had heard, places so haunted locals won't even step inside. From crumbling castles to abandoned pubs, each location carries whispers of the past, shadows of those who never left. As I explored them, I felt fear, curiosity, and a strange connection to history, all at once. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you'll question what's real and wonder if some spirits are still watching us, even today.